The barbed wire bit into the small lamb's legs with relentless force. Every movement, every desperate attempt to break free, only tightened the metal further around his hind legs. He was trapped, completely trapped, and the worst was yet to come. A few yards away, a shadow moved among the dry brush. Light, almost imperceptible footsteps advanced in slow circles. A coyote. Skinny, starving, with his eyes fixed on that opportunity nature rarely offers. An immobilized prey, defenseless, unable to run away. The lamb bleated. Short, high-pitched bleats, heavy with urgency. But the field was empty. The previous night's storm had scattered the entire flock. The sheep had scattered in a panic when thunder tore through the sky, and the old gate gave way under the pressure. Now, in the cold and silent morning, the little one found himself alone, 2 miles from the main farmhouse, in an isolated area where the rancher rarely passed. The wind carried the sound of the bleats into nothingness. No one heard. No one was coming. The coyote tightened the circle. 30 feet, then 25. His muscles tense beneath his rough coat, preparing for the right moment. He was in no rush. The prey wasn't going anywhere. The lamb pulled his legs with all his might. The wire held. He tried again, twisting his body, pushing with his front legs. The metal creaked, but did not give. His strength was beginning to fade. Panic was giving way to exhaustion. On the small animal's forehead, a unique mark stood out. A black patch in the shape of a star, as if nature had left a special signature on that life. But not even something so rare mattered right now. Marks do not save lives. Strength did not save you when you were trapped, and time was running out. The coyote stopped circling. He crouched down, his hind legs compressed against the dirt. The attack was seconds away from happening. The bleats grew weaker, more desperate, almost like a final plea that no one would answer. But among the distant hills, something was moving, something that had detected those bleats, a presence that understood exactly what they meant. And that presence was already coming down the slope, with firm steps despite its age, with a determination that defied its own body. The coyote took his first step toward the lamb, and then something changed. Thousands already know this story. Subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the emotional ending that will restore your faith in loyalty. 4 months earlier, under the warm sun of a spring morning, that same lamb had taken his first trembling steps. His thin legs could barely support his fragile body, and with every attempt to stand up, he tumbled back onto the soft hay in the barn. But his mother was there, always there. Her warm snout nudged him gently, encouraging him, until he finally managed to stay on his feet. The first few days were a constant discovery. The taste of his mother's milk, always available, the warmth of her body during the cold nights, the comforting smell of the wool from the other sheep in the flock. There were 30 of them in total, a tight-knit group that moved together across the ranch's green pastures, grazing under the open sky, drinking fresh water from the creek that cut through the property. The lamb learned to follow his mother. He learned to recognize the sounds of his environment, the birds singing at dawn, the distant rumble of tractors, the voices of the humans who brought fresh hay and checked on the flock daily. Everything was predictable. Everything was safe. He would run through the fields with the other lambs, his little legs still uncoordinated, but growing more confident each day. The star-shaped mark on his forehead meant the rancher always noticed him first during head counts. "That one right there is special," the man used to say, running his rough hand over the soft wool. Weeks turned into months. The lamb grew strong, healthy, always close to his mother, always protected by the flock. Life had a quiet, almost monotonous rhythm. Waking up, grazing, drinking water, resting in the shade of the trees while the midday sun beat down on the field. Then, more grazing, and at dusk, the return to the pen, where they all slept together, keeping each other warm. But nature gives no warning when it decides to test you. That night, the clouds gathered faster than usual. The wind began to howl through the trees, bending branches, kicking up dust. The flock grew restless. The adult sheep recognized the signs of the storm and huddled close to the pen, but the gate was only pushed shut, not properly latched. The first thunderclap exploded in the sky like an angry roar. The lamb, who was sleeping next to his mother, jumped up in fright. Another roll of thunder, then another. Lightning illuminated the pasture in violent white flashes. Panic took hold of the flock. And then it happened. A gust of wind slammed the gate against the fence with a crash, and the metal groaned. The sheep bolted. There was no thinking, only a pure instinct to flee. They ran in every direction, shoving one another, bleeding in despair. The lamb tried to follow his mother, but in the confusion, in the darkness cut only by lightning strikes, he lost her trail. He ran toward where he thought she was. He ran further. His bleats were lost in the roar of the storm. When he finally stopped, exhausted, shivering from cold and fear, he was alone in a part of the ranch he had never seen before. He spent the night huddled under a bush, hoping the dawn would bring his mother back. But when the sun came up, she wasn't there. No one was. He wandered through the unfamiliar field, bleeding, searching for the familiar scent of the flock. That was when he found the wire fence. He tried to slip underneath, just as he had seen other animals do, but his still clumsy coordination, his lack of experience, caused his hind legs to get tangled in the metal. Now, as the coyote crept closer, those memories of safety seemed to belong to another life. His mother's warmth had been replaced by the coldness of the metal, the peaceful sounds of the flock by his own desperate bleats that nobody answered. But in the hills surrounding that ranch, there was another who also knew loss. A dog with a graying coat and steps that no longer had the agility they once did, but which carried something youth rarely possesses, experience, and a loyalty that time cannot erase. Rex had spent 9 years protecting that flock. 9 years listening to bleats, learning the difference between a normal call and a cry of danger. And that morning, even though he was retired from active duty, even resting at the back of the property, his veteran ears picked up something the humans couldn't hear from that distance, a lamb in danger, and Rex started to run. The ranch was nearly 500 acres. Fields that stretched over rolling hills, grazing areas, small patches of woods, the creek winding through the middle of the property. It was large enough that a lamb trapped at one end could go unnoticed for hours, or days. Far away in the northern sector of the ranch, the deep rumble of a tractor cut through the morning silence. The farmhand operated the machine with mechanical movements, hardened by routine. He plowed the earth, preparing the soil for the next season's planting. The noise of the engine swallowed any other sound. The lamb's desperate bleats, 2 miles away, didn't stand a chance of reaching those human ears, which were also covered by ear protection. The dirt road bordering the property saw very little traffic, maybe 3 or 4 vehicles a day. That morning, a blue pickup truck drove by, kicking up a cloud of dust. The driver was in a hurry, eyes fixed on the road ahead, thinking about the day's obligations. The radio was blasting loud music. He passed less than 100 yards from where the lamb was fighting for his life, but he never knew. He never slowed down. The road remained empty after he passed. Life around the lamb ran its natural course, indifferent to the unfolding drama. Birds hopped from branch to branch in the nearby trees, singing their morning melodies, looking for bugs, building nests. To them, this was not a rescue waiting to happen. It was just another day. A group of rabbits grazed about 50 yards away. Their long ears picked up every sound in the environment, always on high alert for danger. When they sensed the coyote's presence, they simply vanished. Within seconds, they disappeared into their underground burrows, where they would wait until the threat had passed. Survival instinct. There was no heroism there, only the desire to see the next sunrise. The sun continued its journey across the sky. What started as a chilly morning gave way to the midday heat. The shadows shifted positions. The lamb felt thirsty. He felt hungry. But more than that, he felt the weight of those eyes fixed on him. The coyote was in no hurry. He had learned, in his years roaming that territory, that anxiety wastes energy. The prey was trapped. He wasn't going to run away. He could wait for the perfect moment, when complete exhaustion would make everything easier. In nature, there are no villains. There are only beings trying to survive. The coyote was starving. Days without a successful hunt had left his ribs visible beneath his rough coat. That lamb represented the difference between living and starving to death. To him, it wasn't cruelty, it was a necessity. For the lamb, of course, that didn't matter. Fear does not understand philosophy. Hours passed. The sun began its descent toward the horizon. The shadows lengthened once more. The coyote noticed the shift in light. Dusk was his favorite time to hunt. His superior night vision gave him an edge. He crept closer. Now he was only 15 feet away. The lamb tried to stand up, but his hind legs no longer responded with any strength. The restricted circulation from the wire, the time spent motionless, had taken their toll. But through the hills, worn-out paws struck the dry dirt with determination. Rex had already covered more than a mile. His hind leg, which carried an old mobility issue, ached with every extended stride. But he didn't slow his pace. His ears remained locked onto those bleats, and his instincts, sharpened by years of guarding flocks, told him exactly what was happening. A baby in danger, a threat closing in, and time running out. While the flock remained scattered, while the humans worked completely unaware, while nature carried on indifferent, Rex ran. Because among all the creatures on that ranch, only he understood what it meant to choose to stay when running away would be easier. The lamb was no longer fighting. His attempts to break free had ceased hours ago. Now he just lay there, motionless, his breathing short and fast. Every inhale seemed to demand a greater effort than the last. The body that previously reacted with panic to every movement from the predator now barely responded at all. The coyote noticed the shift. Predatory animals develop a precise instinct for recognizing when resistance is over, when the prey has no more strength left to make the hunt dangerous. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The daylight was dying. The sun touched the distant horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and red that, under different circumstances, would be beautiful. But in that isolated field, the arrival of dusk meant only one thing. The time of shadows was beginning. And in the shadows, predators have the advantage. The coyote moved closer, 12 feet now. His posture shifted, his front paws lowered slightly, his head tilted forward, the muscles in his hind legs compressed, prepping for the final spring. His eyes, which were merely observing before, now locked onto the target with surgical precision. The lamb felt the shift in the air. Some ancestral instinct, encoded in the DNA of all prey, warned of the imminent danger. He tried to move. His front legs pushed against the ground, attempting to drag his body away. But the wire held firm. He managed to scoot forward maybe 4 inches. It wouldn't make a difference. 10 feet. And then, a sound sliced through the air. A bark, distant but unmistakable. The coyote paused. His ears swiveled in the direction of the sound, triangulating the source. He waited. Another bark. Still far away. Too far to pose an immediate threat. The lamb heard it too. A spark of something resembling hope tried to ignite in his exhausted chest. But the bark was far away, and he didn't have the strength to answer, to signal where he was. The coyote assessed the situation with the coldness of one who survives by basing decisions on calculated risks. The bark was far away. He had time, and that meal was too important to abandon for a distant noise that might not even be heading his way. He took another step. 8 feet. Silence returned. Only the gentle wind swaying the dry brush. The lamb was breathing, but slower and slower, as if his own body were giving up. His eyelids began to flutter shut. Not by choice, simply because keeping them open required energy he no longer possessed. The coyote crouched down completely. This was the stance. The moment had arrived. His hind legs planted themselves firmly in the dirt. His muscles quivered slightly, loading up with power for the final pounce. 6 feet was a distance he would cover in under a second. He took a deep breath, and then the world exploded into sound. Barks, no longer distant, close, very close, fast, loud, heavy with urgency and authority. These were not barks of curiosity or play. They were combat barks, a warning, a threat. The coyote snapped his head around just as a furry figure burst through the brush 50 feet away, large, much larger than him. Moving fast, despite a noticeable limp, the predator had to make a split-second choice. fight for that prey and risk severe injuries against a bigger opponent, or back down and look for another opportunity another day. Survival instinct always wins. He backed up 3 steps, but the figure didn't slow down. He accelerated. Louder, increasingly menacing barks filled the entire space. And then, the creature positioned himself, exactly between the coyote and the lamb, a living barricade of graying fur, bared teeth, and eyes that communicated a clear message. "You're going to have to go through me first." The lamb opened his eyes. For the first time in hours, something warm that wasn't the sun touched his body. It was the body heat of another living being. A protector. Someone who had chosen to stay when the rest of the world walked by. And while the darkness continued to swallow the field, while danger still prowled just a few feet away, one thing changed completely. The lamb was no longer alone. Rex, 9 years old. A German shepherd whose coat no longer held the deep dark shades of his youth. The fur around his snout had turned entirely white. His back showed a scattering of gray hairs, marks of time that no animal escapes, and his right hind leg moved with a subtle restriction, the result of an old injury that never received the complete care it needed. He was no longer the dog that patrolled the entire expanse of the ranch in tireless runs. He was no longer the first one called upon when there was hard work to be done with the flock. The rancher had gently retired him from the more demanding duties 2 years ago, and since then, Rex lived quietly at the back of the property, where he had food, water, and shade. An early retirement for a dog that still had plenty of life ahead of him. But in that moment, staring down the coyote a few feet away, Rex didn't look retired. He looked exactly like what he always was, a protector. The coyote backed up 2 more steps, but his eyes stayed fixed on the lamb. He hadn't given up. He was just reassessing the situation. Rex understood this perfectly. It wasn't the first time he had faced predators. He knew that dance. He knew their persistence. Rex barked again, a deep sound rumbling from his chest, loaded with an authority that only years of experience can produce. He stepped sideways, always keeping himself between the threat and the lamb. His eyes didn't blink. They didn't drift. The coyote tested the other side, circling. Rex tracked every move, pivoting his own body, adjusting his stance. The bad leg made him limp visibly, but it didn't stop him from moving with purpose. Behind him, the lamb watched everything with wide eyes. His fear of the predator was now mixed with uncertainty about this new element. Who was this big dog? Was he safe? Instinct said to flee from any stranger, but the wire still held him down. And something deeper, something beyond rational instinct, whispered that this creature was not a threat. Rex noticed the fear in the lamb. Without taking his eyes off the coyote, he took a step back, moving closer to the small animal. His movements were slow, deliberate, non-threatening. When he got close enough, he lowered his snout and quickly sniffed the lamb. The scent of blood was there, but it wasn't severe. The scent of exhaustion, too. And fear. A lot of fear. Rex did something guard dogs understand instinctively. He positioned his body sideways, shielding the lamb while keeping the predator in his sights. Then, he let out a different sound. It wasn't a bark. It was something softer, almost a low whine, a communication sound dogs use with one another. The lamb understood the message in some primal way. "I am not here to hurt you. I am here to protect you." The coyote kept circling, but he kept his distance now. 15 feet. Then 20. He hadn't given up completely, but Rex's presence had totally changed the equation. This was no longer an easy hunt. It was a confrontation that could result in serious injuries. And injuries for a solitary predator mean starvation. Rex sat down, not out of fatigue, but strategy. He was showing that he wasn't going anywhere, that he had claimed that spot, right next to that lamb, and he would stay there for as long as it took. The sun finally vanished entirely below the horizon. Night arrived with its blanket of darkness and cold. The temperature began dropping rapidly, as it always does in wide-open fields. Rex shifted again, this time lying down completely beside the lamb. His large, furry body formed a heat barrier. The lamb felt the immediate warmth, and, for the first time since morning when he got caught in that wire, He relaxed his muscles. But they both knew, in their own ways, that it was going to be a long night. The coyote was still around, invisible in the darkness, but present. Rex could catch his scent on the breeze. And surviving together until daybreak would only be the beginning of a much greater ordeal. The first thing Rex tried was the obvious. He examined the barbed wire binding the lamb's hind legs. His experienced eyes assessed the situation in the fading light. The metal was tangled in a complex knot, pulled tight by the lamb's own panicked movements during hours of struggling to break free. Rex lowered his head and tried to bite the wire. His teeth struck the cold metal. He pulled carefully, trying to loosen the knot. The wire didn't yield. He tried another angle, biting down on a different section. The metal pressed painfully into his gums. Rex kept at it for a few seconds, but quickly grasped the reality. The barbed wire was too strong, too tight, and trying to remove it with his mouth would only injure himself without solving anything. He stopped. He took a deep breath, and he made a decision that would prove to be the most important one of that night. If he couldn't free the lamb, then he would stay right there, with him, guarding him until another solution presented itself. Rex lay down again beside the little animal, his body forming a shield of heat. The lamb, who had initially tensed up at the proximity, now embraced that presence. The warmth was welcome, the loneliness was over, and that somehow made all the difference in the world. The night pushed forward with its trademark open country silence. The stars dotted the sky by the thousands. The moon, in its first quarter, cast only a faint glow, but it was enough for Rex to maintain his watch. And he was going to need it. Around midnight, the coyote returned. Rex heard the footsteps before he saw a thing. His ears twitched, catching the sound of light paws on dry dirt about 60 feet away. He stood up instantly and barked, a clear warning. The coyote stopped, visible only as a silhouette in the dark. He stood there for maybe 2 minutes, weighing his options. Then he backed away and vanished once again. Rex went back to his post beside the lamb. He lay down, but he didn't sleep. His eyes stayed open, sweeping the darkness constantly. An hour later, the coyote tried again, this time coming from a different angle. Rex noticed and stood up, barking before he even laid eyes on the predator. The message was always the same. I'm not backing down. You can try as many times as you want. The answer will always be the same. The lamb began to understand the pattern. Every time Rex stood up and barked, it meant the danger had returned, and every time Rex came back and lay down at his side, it meant the danger had been temporarily chased off. It was a wordless communication, but perfectly clear. The temperature dropped drastically. The pre-dawn chill in an open pasture can be brutal, especially for a young, already weakened lamb. But Rex's body acted like a natural heater. His thick coat, his size, his high body temperature, all of it built a barricade against the cold. The lamb pressed himself tighter against Rex, and Rex, in response, adjusted his posture to cover even more of the small frame. Right around 3 a.m, the coyote made his boldest move. He moved in fast, betting on the element of surprise, on the chance that Rex had fallen asleep. But Rex wasn't sleeping. He sprang up so fast it startled the lamb. And this time Rex didn't just bark. He lunged 10 feet toward the coyote, teeth bared, hackles raised, issuing a guttural snarl that left no doubt as to his intentions. The coyote scrambled back, and this time he left for real. Rex had proven his commitment was absolute, that his energy to defend that lamb was not running out. The predator would need to find other opportunities somewhere else. Rex returned to the lamb and, for the first time, did something different. He gently touched his snout to the little animal's forehead, to the star-shaped mark. It was like an acknowledgement, a gesture of connection. The lamb answered with a soft, low bleat, wildly different from the desperate cries of hours prior. They didn't speak the same language. They weren't the same species. But in that moment, stranded in the pitch-black pasture, they shared something that transcended those boundaries. Trust. The lamb trusted that Rex would not abandon him, and Rex had made a silent promise he would keep until the very end. The final hours of the night went by more peacefully. The coyote didn't come back. Other night sounds filled the space: crickets, the occasional breeze, an owl off in the distance. but no direct threats. As the first rays of sunlight began to brighten the horizon, Rex stood up and looked around. Dawn brought light, but it didn't bring solutions. The lamb was still trapped, they were still isolated, and now a whole new set of problems was knocking at the door. Thirst, hunger, and the heat of the upcoming day. Rex knew his endurance had limits. He was old. His leg was already hurting considerably after a full night of constantly getting up and lying back down. His body was crying out for water, for food. But more importantly, Rex knew the lamb wouldn't survive another full day in those conditions. He needed to do something guard dogs rarely do. Something that went against his instinct to stay with the flock, to never abandon his post. Rex needed to actively seek help. He needed to make the humans understand that there was an emergency. But he couldn't leave the lamb unguarded. Not now, when he had spent the entire night ensuring his safety. So Rex made another choice. He was going to start barking, but not territorial barks, not casual warning barks. They would be distress calls, aimed directly at where he knew the farmhouse stood. Relentless, tireless barking, completely different from any pattern the humans were used to hearing from him. And while he barked, he would stay right next to the lamb, guarding him and calling for backup at the exact same time. This partnership is touching hearts in dozens of cities. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and find out who else in your area is following this story. The sun came up bringing light, but also bringing a new enemy, the heat. In the early hours of the morning, the temperature was still bearable, but as the sun climbed higher in the sky, that open field turned into a thermal trap. There was no shade, there was no water, and both Rex and the lamb had now gone over 12 hours without a drink. Rex felt the thirst first. His tongue hung out of his mouth, his breathing rate had picked up. It's the way dogs regulate their body temperature, but it's also a process that drains hydration fast. He knew where there was water. He knew every creek, every trough on the ranch, but they were all far away. Too far to go and come back before something happened to the lamb. The small animal was suffering too. His eyelids fluttered lazily. The body that was already battered by the night was now facing the added exhaustion of severe dehydration. He bleated occasionally, but the sounds were faint, almost unnoticeable. Rex knew they didn't have much time left. That's when it started, the barking. But these weren't standard barks. Rex had spent 9 years on that ranch. He had barked thousands of times. Alert barks when he sniffed out predators. Territorial barks when strangers walked up. Excited barks when the rancher showed up with dinner. Every type of bark had a pattern, a cadence, a purpose. What Rex started doing now was different from all of that. They were targeted barks. He stood facing the exact direction where he knew the main house was located, and he barked in sequences. 3 quick barks. Pause. 3 more barks. Pause. Like an SOS code, like a plea, like a scream crying out, "Get over here, we have an emergency." And he wouldn't stop. Hours ticked by. The sun kept climbing. The heat became punishing. Rex's throat started getting hoarse, but he kept at it. Bark after bark. Call after call. He didn't know if anyone was listening. He didn't know if it was making a dent, but it was the only thing he could do without abandoning the lamb. And then, right around 10 in the morning, a new problem walked onto the scene. A second coyote. Rex spotted her cresting a slight rise in the terrain, about 40 yards out. She was smaller than the first one, likely a female. But predators hunting in pairs were far more dangerous than a lone wolf. They could run coordinated attacks. One creates a diversion, while the other goes for the throat. Rex cut off his barking for a second and locked entirely onto the 2 animals. They were communicating with each other through tiny twitches, subtle glances. They were scheming. The first coyote, the one who had spent the night stalking them, moved out to the left. The second one flanked right. They were boxing them in. Rex pivoted, trying to keep them both in his line of sight, planting himself over the lamb in a way that shielded as much of the tiny body as possible. The coyote on the left pushed forward 10 feet. Rex growled and took a step her way. Immediately, the coyote on the right rushed in, capitalizing on the distraction. Rex had to whip around fast, barking violently, blocking the charge. It was a deadly dance, and Rex was outnumbered. But he had something they didn't: absolute motivation. Those coyotes just wanted a meal. Rex was protecting a life. The gap in pure willpower was massive. He barked with such ferocity, with so much aggression, darting rapidly from one side to the other, that the coyotes reconsidered. As hungry as they were, that large dog, even an old one, even a limping one, posed a high-stakes risk. He could inflict serious damage, and injuries were a death sentence for wild animals. After 15 minutes of probing, the pair backed off. They didn't vanish entirely. They hung back at a distance, watching, but they stopped attacking. Rex returned to the lamb, who was shaking despite the heat. The sheer terror of the near assault had burned through his final reserves of energy, and it was right then that Rex noticed a third threat. He looked up and saw dark silhouettes circling high in the sky. Vultures, 3 of them, flying in slow, patient loops, just waiting. They wouldn't strike anything that was alive and putting up a fight, but they were a dead giveaway, beacons signaling that death was closing in, and their presence would only attract more scavengers. Rex understood with absolute clarity, if help didn't arrive soon, neither of them was going to see the sunset. He went back to barking, but now with a renewed urgency, fueled by a desperation stemming from deep within. His voice was raspy, every bark felt like sandpaper on his parched throat. But he didn't quit. He couldn't quit. 11 in the morning. Noon. 1 o'clock. The sun hit its absolute peak. The heat was unforgiving. Rex was panting heavily. The lamb was fading in and out of consciousness. But Rex kept barking. His voice was a shredded whisper of what it had been that morning, but he kept pushing. Because years ago, back when he was a working dog, Rex had learned something. Humans responded to persistent barking patterns. When something was genuinely wrong, when the barking just wouldn't quit, they came out to investigate. It was knowledge forged through sheer experience, and right now, it was their very last hope. 2 in the afternoon. Rex's voice was shot. Every bark was pure agony, but he kept grinding them out one after the other, with the pauses dragging out longer as his body begged for mercy. And then, at 2:20, the tide turned. An engine sound, far off, but undeniably there, drifting in from the dirt road. Rex knew that sound, a truck. He barked with a sudden burst of adrenaline, ignoring the pain, barking straight toward the noise. 3 barks. Pause. 3 barks. The engine noise didn't fade at first. The truck kept rolling by. Despair crashed over Rex like a tidal wave. He barked louder, more frantic. And then, the miracle happened. The engine note shifted. It geared down. It stopped. A door popped open. Heavy boots on the gravel. And a woman's voice, distant but crisp. "What in the world is that? That's a weird bark." Rex barked again, and again, guiding them, summoning them. "There's an animal in trouble out there," the woman said, and Rex could hear her footsteps crunching closer, hesitant, but closing the gap. After 30 hours, after an entire night of standing guard, after hours of thirst and scorching heat and barking his voice into oblivion, someone had finally heard him. Help was on the way. Clara was 26 and worked as a vet at a clinic in the next town over. That Saturday afternoon, she was heading back from a farm call when she decided to take the dirt road cutting through the county. It was the long way home, but a more scenic route. She liked to cruise through there every now and then, just taking in the wide open spaces. That's when she caught the barking. At first, she figured it was just some ranch dog doing his usual patrol. But something about the cadence made her hit the brakes. Those weren't perimeter warning barks. They were different. They had a rhythm, a sense of urgency. And the bark itself sounded wrecked, raspy, full of desperation. She put the truck in park and rolled down the window. Listened again. 3 barks. Pause. 3 barks. Echoing from a spot way off the blacktop, maybe 200 yards out into the pasture. Clara grabbed her phone and fired up the camera. Working as a vet, she had learned to always document sketchy animal situations. You never know when having it on video might save the day. She hopped out of the cab and started hiking toward the noise, recording as she went. "There's an animal in trouble out there," she mumbled to the lens, more to reassure herself than for any future audience. "That bark isn't normal at all." As she crested a small ridge, the scene finally came into focus. First, she spotted the dog, a big German shepherd, clearly up there in years, standing over something in the dirt, barking right at her now, but not in attack mode. It was a beacon. Then she saw starlight, a tiny lamb, completely still, tangled up tight in barbed wire, and it all clicked into place. "Oh my God," she whispered, the camera still rolling. "He's guarding the lamb." Clara walked up nice and slow, using a soft voice so she wouldn't spook Rex. "It's okay, buddy. I'm here to help. I'm here." Rex finally stopped barking. He stared at her with eyes that practically screamed exhaustion, but also flashed something pretty close to relief. Like he was saying, about time. Clara ran a quick triage on the situation. The wire was strung way too tight for her to unspool by herself without making it worse. She needed bolt cutters, and she needed an extra set of hands. She grabbed her phone and dialed the only number she knew out there, the local rancher's co-op line. "I need to get a hold of whoever owns the land off Pine Road, mile marker 15. It's an animal emergency, very urgent." 15 minutes later, a heavy-duty pickup came tearing down the dirt road. The rancher hopped out with an older guy riding shotgun. "I own the place. What's going on?" Clara gave them the rundown as she hustled them out to the spot. When the rancher laid eyes on Rex, his face went completely blank with shock. "Rex, what in the hell are you doing all the way out here? You're supposed to be back at the house." Rex let out a single, soft woof, almost like he was answering back. The older guy, who introduced himself as the co-op's large animal vet, instantly dropped to his knees next to the lamb. "He's severely dehydrated. We gotta get him cut loose right now." The rancher grabbed a pair of heavy snips from his toolbox and, with careful, practiced hands, started snipping away the wire. Clara kept the camera rolling, capturing the whole thing. The snap of the metal. The lamb's legs finally pulling free. The way Rex watched every single move like a hawk, never leaving the little guy's side for a second. Once the lamb was totally free, Rex did something nobody saw coming. He leaned down and gently licked the lamb's face, exactly the way a mother ewe cleans a newborn. And the lamb, who by all rights should have been paralyzed with fear, just rested his head right against Rex's chest. "You getting this on video?" the rancher asked, his voice cracking a little. "That dog is 9 years old. I retired him from working the herds because I figured he was just too old to keep up. And look what he pulled off." The vet ran a quick physical on both of them. "The lamb's gonna need IV fluids, antibiotics for these wire cuts, but nothing lethal. He'll bounce back just fine." Then he ran his hands over Rex. "Severe dehydration here too. And this back leg. He's got some chronic scar tissue in here. Did you ever get this checked out?" "Never really thought I needed to," the rancher admitted, guilt heavily lacing his words. "He always seemed to manage all right." "He managed because he didn't have a choice," the vet shot back. "But with the right kind of physical therapy, his range of motion could actually improve a hell of a lot." They loaded them both up into the back of the pickup. Clara helped bed the lamb down in a crate lined with straw. When they tried to put Rex in the cab, he growled for the first time since they showed up. He absolutely refused to be separated. All right, I hear you," the rancher caved. "Just put 'em back there together." The second Rex and the lamb were side by side in the crate. You could see the tension drain right out of both of them. Clara kept recording the whole thing, the bumpy ride back to the main house, getting them settled into adjoining stalls in the barn, the way the lamb would start crying if anybody tried to lead Rex away, the way Rex would pace around if they tried to move the lamb. "They're bonded," the vet explained. "And it's not your standard pack bond. That dog spent hours, probably all night long, putting his life on the line for that lamb. In their heads, as of right now, they are family." The rancher stared down at the little star-shaped patch on the lamb's head. "I always called this little guy Starlight because of that mark. And Rex, he was always one of a kind. I guess I really screwed up putting him out to pasture so early." That evening, Clara edited the footage on her phone. She had about 12 minutes of solid tape. She slapped some text over the clips to give people the backstory: retired working dog, lamb trapped in wire, standing guard against coyotes, barking an SOS for hours, an unbreakable bond forged in the dirt. She uploaded it with a straightforward caption: 9-year-old dog, retired for being too old, protects trapped lamb for over 30 hours and uses pure smarts to flag down human help. This is what unspoken loyalty looks like. By the next morning, the clip had 1,000 views. Day 2, it cracked 100,000. By day 3, it was sitting at 5 million. And on the 4th day, when Clara checked her phone over coffee, the video had blown past 20 million views. The entire internet knew exactly who Rex and Starlight were. But this story was just getting started, because what nobody saw coming was that this viral fame was about to trigger a chain reaction that would change both of their lives permanently. The comments flooded in by the thousands. People from all over the globe were sharing the link, bawling over Rex's dedication, cheering on the rescue op. But mixed in with all the heart emojis, a very practical question started bubbling up. What's going to happen to them now? Please tell me they aren't going to separate them. Does anyone know if they get to stay together? Clara saw those questions piling up and decided to do some digging. She gave the rancher a call. The chat was polite enough, but his answer set off alarm bells in her head. The lamb's going into the feeder pen once he's healed up. He's livestock, you know. That's the business. And Rex? Well, I'm thinking I might take him down to the county shelter. They do a decent job with senior dogs down there. Clara knew the grim reality of that. County shelters were always packed to the rafters. Senior large breed dogs almost never got pulled for adoption. The harsh truth was that Rex, after pulling off a legitimately heroic rescue, would probably ride out his final years sitting in a concrete run, totally alone, miles away from the little guy he nearly died to protect. She wasn't going to let that happen. Clara cut a quick follow-up video laying out the facts. Rex and Starlight are doing great physically, but they're slated to be split up very soon. If this story meant something to you, help us keep this pair together. Share this around. Tag farm sanctuaries, private rescues, literally anywhere that has the space to take them in as a package deal. The response was instantaneous and totally overwhelming. Hundreds of DMs flooded her inbox offering to adopt them on the spot. Families saying they'd gladly put a senior shepherd and a growing sheep in their suburban backyards. Hobby farms offering up acreage. Massive non-profit animal sanctuaries from 3 states away blowing up her phone. But the rancher was a businessman at the end of the day. He wasn't about to just hand over a piece of livestock to live as a house pet without a fair buyout. And he wanted solid proof that wherever they landed actually had the infrastructure to handle them. That's when the Miller family reached out. The founders of the Green Valley Sanctuary, located about 80 miles up the interstate from the ranch, operated a massive educational rescue facility where they rehabilitated farm animals and ran field trips for local schools. They had a full-time veterinary staff, state-of-the-art barns, and a genuine, rock-solid mission built around animal welfare education. They submitted a highly professional, comprehensive proposal. They would legally adopt Rex and Starlight as a pair, cover all necessary medical bills, including the orthopedic surgery for Rex's bad leg, and cut the rancher a check for the market value of the lamb. The clincher, they promised full transparency with regular video updates. Rex and Starlight's story would become a cornerstone of the sanctuary's humane education program, teaching kids firsthand about loyalty, protection, and the incredibly complex emotional bonds animals can form. The rancher drove up to tour the sanctuary himself. He walked the grounds. He grilled the vet staff. He saw the other rescue cases thriving out in the green pastures. And he finally made his call. They get to stay together. The second Clara dropped the update video, it racked up another 10 million views before dinner time. But the real tearjerker was still on the calendar, moving day. Over 50 people camped out at the ranch gates that morning. Local families who had been tracking the saga online, reporters from the regional news affiliates, a handful of kids from the elementary school down the road. Everybody wanted to see Rex and Starlight ride off into the sunset. When the sanctuary's custom transport van pulled up the driveway, the crowd actually cheered. Rex and Starlight were loaded together into a massive plush-lined pen in the back of the rig, and for the first time, the cameras got a crystal-clear shot of the bond between them. The way Starlight immediately pressed his head under Rex's chin, the way Rex leaned his whole body weight against the lamb, still standing guard. The little star-shaped patch on Starlight's forehead was photographed hundreds of times that afternoon. And a few weeks later, when Green Valley Sanctuary launched their new logo. That exact star was front and center. A badge representing second chances, unbreakable loyalty, and a kind of love that doesn't care about what species you are. As the transport van rolled back down the dirt road, kicking up golden dust in the late afternoon sun, Clara kept the camera trained on the taillights. And right before she ended the stream, she hit the nail perfectly on the head. Two Souls just proved that family isn't about blood or biology, it's a choice. And Rex chose to stay when the rest of the world would have run for the hills. Rex didn't have the vocabulary to explain why he held his ground. He couldn't articulate, "I am choosing to protect you," or "I am never leaving your side." But he didn't need a single word. 30 hours of holding the line, barking until his vocal cords bled, refusing to take the easy way out and run, said everything that ever needed to be said. 6 months after they pulled them out of the dirt, Green Valley Sanctuary posted a highly anticipated update video. Rex was running. It wasn't the lightning-fast sprint of a puppy, but he was absolutely moving. The orthopedic surgery was a total home run. His range of motion was dramatically better, and striding right alongside him, kicking up dirt with legs that were now thick and muscular, was Starlight. He wasn't a fragile little lamb anymore, but a robust young sheep, with that trademark star still shining bright on his forehead. They slept curled up together every single night. They ate out of bowls placed side by side. Whenever the yellow school buses rolled up for field trips, the kids immediately swarmed the fence to see the hero dog and his best friend. And the sanctuary guides would tell them the story, how a dog that the world wrote off as too old proved that heart and experience will always beat out youth, how true loyalty doesn't require a paycheck to show up to work. Clara's original rescue vlog eventually shattered the 50 million view mark. Her inbox became a wall of messages from folks saying Rex's grit inspired them to go out and adopt senior pets. Shelters across the country reported a massive spike in applications for older, overlooked dogs. The story triggered a quiet but incredibly real shockwave of positive change. But perhaps the heaviest impact was in the questions the story planted in millions of heads. How often do we choose to stay in the fight when walking away is so much easier? How often do we hold the line when every instinct screams at us to cut our losses? How often do we stand up for someone, not because it's our job, but simply because it is the right thing to do? Rex would never know he was internet famous. He would never grasp that his face was plastered across screens all over the globe, that his standoff was being recounted in dozens of different languages. To him, the only thing that mattered was right there, in the green grass of that sanctuary pasture, where Starlight was quietly grazing just a few feet away. Nature hadn't changed its rules. Predators were still hunting in the brush. Animals were still getting lost in the dark. Storms were still scattering herds. But now, millions of people knew something fundamental. That sometimes, the heaviest lessons on courage, on love, on planting your feet when the ground gets shaky, come from creatures that will never speak a single word. They just stay. They protect. They choose. And buried in that choice is everything we will ever need to learn about what it actually means to be loyal. Because when the dust settles, the most unlikely heroes aren't the ones screaming about their victories from the mountaintops. They are the ones who quietly refuse to walk away, even when nobody is watching, even when the night feels endless, even when their own bodies are begging them to quit. Rex proved that. And a star-shaped patch of black wool still shines today as proof. Loyalty doesn't age out. It only gets stronger. It still gives me chills every time I think about this story. Rex didn't have to stay. He could have easily turned his back and walked away like so many others did. But I saw something so much bigger out there in the dirt. A choice that completely defies everything we assume about self-preservation and survival instinct. It makes me truly believe that real courage doesn't roar, it just refuses to leave. I realized that Rex taught us the one thing we've all forgotten, that sometimes loving someone means choosing to stay when walking away would be infinitely easier. And honestly, it's a gut-punch reminder of exactly who we are supposed to be. Because at the end of the day, the only question left to ask yourself is, when was the last time you chose to stay?